How do I construct or build the best version of myself? Well, it starts with self-image. And self-image isn't fluff, it's foundational. Your self-image, or how you see yourself, quietly dictates how you think, feel, act, and perform in this world. And so you will never consistently outperform your self-image. That's why learning how to build a strong, healthy one may be one of the most important skills of your life. So in this episode of Something for Everybody, I, Aaron Mashpitz, am going to break down self-image, what it is, why it matters, and exactly how to improve it so you can step into the best version of yourself in greatest service to the world. Hello, my friend. Before we jump straight into the episode, I would love to share the sponsors of this podcast. And the sponsors of this podcast are all the businesses that I've created that are really part of the ecosystem that run this whole thing. And at the top of that list is Patreon. Patreon is the home of our exclusive community where we do bonus episodes, live streams, Q&As, and merch discounts, and so much more. Patreon is the number one way to support this podcast and to support my mental health nonprofit called You Are Loved. Next, we have my clothing brand called Shop for Everybody. Every hat and every t-shirt you see me wear on every single episode of this podcast is from Shop for Everybody. It's the home of For the Dads, For the Moms, all Something for Everybody merch, and it's the home of all You Are Loved merch. So that's shopforeverybody.com. And the last thing is my sports performance brand called Champions Adjust. Again, if you see anything Champions Adjust related, it's all found at champsadjust.com. It also has its own podcast. We also do a sports show through Champions Adjust. And if you're looking for any mindset or mental skills classes, they can all be found at champsadjust.com. And so if you want to stay up to date on everything that we're doing here with all of the businesses that I'm involved in, please go to aaronmashpitz.com and sign up for our weekly newsletter. Thank you. Now, on to the episode, completely uninterrupted and ad-free. Here we go. Let's start with what actually self-image is. Self-image is a collection of beliefs, impressions, and perceptions you hold about yourself. These impressions, of course, are formed over time through whether it be childhood experiences, parenting and authority figures, culture and environment, past failures and successes, and a huge one is your internal self-talk. And so, of course, a positive self-image creates confidence, resilience, and consistent action, while a negative self-image creates doubt, hesitation, and self-sabotage. And so here's the key principle. Human beings always act, feel, and perform in alignment with what they believe to be true about themselves and their environment. And so that's why self-image work matters, and it's so important. In this episode, we are going to dive in deep, and we're going to do the work on our self-image. But before we go any further or any deeper, let's pause and reflect. Ask yourself honestly, truly ask yourself honestly, how do I see myself? Is my self-image helping or hindering my goals or targets? Would I follow the person I see in the mirror? If you need to pause this video and reflect, do it. I highly recommend pausing and reflecting because these questions are the foundational piece on which all the other work is going to come from. And so awareness has to come before change. As we're going to talk about later in this episode, it's awareness, acceptance, action. So please do pause and reflect if you need to, because it's going to give you some foundational insights on yourself, on how we can grow, tweak, alter, change, and evolve our self-image through the steps that we're going to outline below. And so then we think about this concept of identity, which is the core of self-image. Your self-image is deeply tied to your identity, and I personally define identity as repeated beingness. It's not what you do, right? Your identity is not what you do. You are not your job title, your role, or your job, or whatever the case may be, right? Of course, you can be a parent, a husband, a father, an athlete, an entrepreneur, a coach, a clerk, an artist, a business person, a lawyer, a doctor. All those things are amazing, but those are occupations, not identity. Identity is who you are being repeatedly. So that means your identity is actually shaped by your core values. Do you have core values? It's shaped by the actions you take daily, and it's shaped by the promises you make and keep to yourself. That's actually your identity. And so when your values and your actions align consistently, your identity strengthens and your self image follows. So let's remove the idea of thinking of our identity as our job title, our occupation, or our roles. Let's think of our identity as our repeated beingness, and that it's shaped by core values, actions, and the promises we keep to ourselves. And of course, our job title or our roles have an influence on our identity, on our core values, on the actions we take daily. But let's truly start to think about our identity as our repeated beingness, because then we can show up as our best selves through our core values, through our actions, through the promises we keep to ourselves in sort of any domain or title or role that we have in our life. And we're not boxed in, and we don't foreclose ourselves to experience sort of the greatness of life because we're just this one thing. We're not. We're not just this one thing. We're much more complex, deeper individuals. And that's what our identity is. It is our repeated beingness. So we have to understand that as we get deeper into working on our self image. And so we are going to discuss 6 ways to improve our self image. But before we do that, we have to understand why our self image can change, right? We know the growth and the fixed mindset. That stuff is very important. Your brain is not fixed, also, it's plastic. Now, it can't change like a dramatic amount, of course, right? You should really listen to Andrew Huberman, Dr. Andrew Huberman, talk about this concept. I'm stealing some of that information here just to help you understand why, if we do the work on our self image, we can actually change and grow and become different and see ourselves in a different light because of this concept called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated thoughts, actions, emotions, and behaviors. So every thought you think, every action you take, every story you repeat strengthens specific neural pathways. So over time, these pathways become your default way of seeing yourself, whether that in a good, positive way or a bad, negative way. It doesn't matter. The specific neural pathways become your default mode. And so the key is your self-image is not who you are. It's a pattern your brain has practiced. And that should be such a freeing idea because we can practice a new pattern. A negative self-image is learned. A confident self-image or a positive self-image can be learned. That is so powerful, this idea of neuroplasticity, that we can create new neural pathways. We can create a new default mode for how we see ourselves. So when you repeatedly act in alignment with this new identity that we're going to shape and develop, keeping those promises, taking action, reinforcing those successes, your brain updates its internal model and its default mode of who you are. And this is why, visualization or affirmations alone don't work. Visualization and affirmations have a place, but action actually works. Action is the only way forward, right? Your nervous system learns through experience, not just intention. And so it's important to set intentions and have affirmations and visualize your future success. But the only thing that's actually going to change those internal models or those default modes is new patterns. And new patterns are developed through action. And that is so fucking cool to understand. So now, because we know that, let's jump deeper into the 6 ways we can actually improve our self-image through this work. And so the first step, as I mentioned a little bit before, is awareness, acceptance, action. This 3-step framework applies to any meaningful change you want in your life. Specifically, in this episode, we're talking about, altering, changing, and growing and reconstructing our self-image. But if you want to change anything in your life, use this 3-step approach. So first, we have awareness. Recognize that your current self-image may be limiting your quality of life. So that's the awareness part. Then we move into acceptance. Accept reality without judgment. You cannot change what you refuse to accept. We have awareness, then we accept it fully, and now we move into action. Nothing fucking changes ever without action. Reflection alone, affirmations alone, visualization alone does not build self-image, but new behaviors and actions do. So the first step in how we're going to actually improve our self-image is awareness, acceptance, action. That's the cornerstone of all change that you want to apply to your life. Then we move on to number 2, which is change the story you tell yourself, but really it's challenge the story you tell yourself. Sorry, I'm moving around a lot. My freaking knees are absolutely killing me. Anyways, you don't need to know that. Anyway, so number 2, change or challenge the story you tell yourself. Everyone carries an internal narrative. So ask yourself, where did this story come from? Whose voice am I hearing? Is this belief actually true or just familiar? Like we had some questions above, maybe you want to pause and reflect right here so you can understand maybe where your internal story came from. Because self-image improves when you challenge inherited narratives and replace them with intentional ones backed by action. And so again, we're trying to challenge this internal story we've been telling ourselves for a very long time. Is it true? Is it familiar? What voice am I hearing? Where did this come from? Reflecting deeply on that, then understanding those inherited narratives, challenging them, then replacing them with more intentional ones that we want our life to look like, and then backing that up by action, awareness, acceptance, action. That is number 2. And then number 3 is channel your inner rock star. Channel your inner rock star. This is what Albert Einstein said. Everybody is a genius. Everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid. So based on that, here is an actual exercise you can do. It's a 5-minute daily self-image routine. It's simple but powerful. And so if your self-image, as we've been talking about, is built through repetition and action, then the goal is simple. The target is simple. Practice the version of you that you want to become daily. This routine takes 5 minutes and works because it combines all the stuff we just talked about: reflection, intention, and reinforcement. We have 3 more steps after this, but this specific action applies to channeling your inner rock star and challenging or changing the story you tell yourself. And so we go to minute number 1, which is just, get grounded and start breathing. Take some deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, deep into the diaphragm. Just try and get exactly into the present moment and just be, right? This sort of calms the nervous system, creates space between you and old patterns. And then ask yourself, who do I choose to be today? And that's 1 minute. And then move on to the next minute, which is identity priming. Say out loud, if possible, I am someone who values blank, blank, and blank. Choose 3 core values. This primes your brain to notice opportunities to act in alignment with them, right? We talked about identity being repeated beingness. This is the core values you want to represent. Choose 3. I am someone who values consistency, zest, and resilience. Cool. Now look for opportunities to act in alignment with them. That's minute number 2. And then we move on to minute number 3, which is visualize one aligned action. Visualize one specific action you will take today after your meditation that reflects your best self. Focus on behavior, not outcomes. So examples are pausing before reacting. Maybe you want to respond, not react. Showing up to train, showing up on time, speaking to myself and others honestly and calmly. These are focusing on behaviors and actions, not outcomes. And they're also focusing on things that you have full control over. Very important when we're picking this one action that we can take today that reflects our new best self that we're trying to alter and construct through our self-image work. So that's minute number 3. And then minute number 4, make one small promise. Ask, what is one promise I will keep today no matter what? Make it small enough to guarantee success. I've talked about this a ton. This insight from BJ Fogg: make your habits too small to fail. Same thing applies here with making one small promise, right? Self-image is built through credibility, not motivation. So that's minute number 4. And then we move on to minute number 5, reinforce the identity that you're trying to create. At the end of the day, acknowledge what you did right. Say, that's like me. That's like me. You're teaching your brain who you are through repetition, creating that new default mode and those new internal pathways. So that is a 5-minute exercise to start channeling your inner rock star and to start changing the story you tell yourself. And so if you actually want to change your self-image and actually construct the best version of you in greatest service to the world, you will actually do that work. And then we move on to step number 4 in 6 ways to improve our 6 ways to improve our self-image. It's about to say mental health. It's all kind of part of the same deal. But anyways, number 4 is exercise and honor the body. Exercise is one of the fastest and most reliable ways to improve your self-image. right? Of course, numerous studies show a very strong correlation between regular exercise and higher self-esteem, or reduced anxiety and depression, improved mood and confidence, right? All of those things are true. But in relationship to specifically what we're talking about, exercise doesn't just improve your self-image just because it changes your body. It improves your self-image because it creates evidence. You say you're going to move your body, you say you're going to exercise, and you do, fuck yeah, that's like me. Evidence, credibility. You're doing what you say you're going to do. You're doing what you say you're going to do, and you say you're going to take care of yourself, and you follow through. That builds self-trust. Self-trust is the foundation for confidence, and that all links together with your new self-image, right? Weight training is especially powerful because progress is measurable. More reps, more weight, more strength, clear feedback. And the same thing can happen with the new self-image you are building and growing and constructing through every action you take and every promise you keep to yourself. And so, but zooming out a little bit, I have to mention my favorite thing of all time, which is the foundations, the 4 foundations, being brilliant at the basics. Exercise is just part of sort of mastering the 4 foundations or the 4 fundamentals of being a human being, which is eating well, moving well, sleeping well, and thinking well. So when you consistently honor these 4 things of eating, moving, sleeping, and thinking, you build your self-image. Your self-image has to improve because your behavior is aligned with self-respect. And of course, self-respect and self-image go hand in hand. So of course, we want to exercise and honor our body and move well and keep the little promises we make to ourselves. But we also want to master the 4 fundamentals of eating, moving, sleeping, and thinking. And when we do that, and our behavior is aligned with those things, our self-image improves because it's aligned with self-respect. That's really important. And I've mentioned this a couple of times now, but number 5, the 5th way to improve your actual self-image is to do what you say you're going to do. This may be the most important step of all. This may be the actual foundation, but it's step number 5. Ask yourself this question honestly. Do I do what I say I'm going to do? No, there's never been an elite athlete on the planet that I've worked with, coached, or studied that hasn't done this. If you're going to be great at anything in your life, you absolutely do what you say you're going to do. That is the foundation for becoming elite in everything. Like I said, self-trust earns you confidence. Self-image is built on self-trust, and self-trust gets you confidence. It's all a loop of mastering these fundamentals, right? Every kept promise strengthens it. Every broken promise weakens it. It's like a relationship. This applies to both big and small things. Follow up when you say you will. Show up when you say you're going to show up. Keep small commitments to yourself and to other people. You don't improve self-image by positive thinking alone. Hopefully you've gotten that clear message from this episode. You earn a better self-image through credibility, and it starts with doing what you say you're going to do. So again, like always, with everything that you do in your life, start small, very small, as small as humanly possible, and then keep those promises that are impossible to miss, making those habits too small to fail, and then let the evidence stack, and then just allow your self-image to alter and grow and build into the capable, powerful, potential person that you are. That's what it is right there. That's beautiful. And then number 6, reinforce the identity. That's like me. I mentioned that earlier, but this is the last step, the 6th step in improving our self-image. Your self-image was formed through repetition. To change it, you must consciously reinforce it. Each time you act in alignment with your best self, say, that's like me. Each time you act in alignment with your best self, say, that's like me. That's like me to show up. That's like me to stay calm. That's like me to respond and not react. That's like me to follow through. That's like me to take care of myself. You reward all the behavior that you want to repeat. And over time, again, it changes those default mode networks, and you are a person that you say you are. You reinforce that identity that you wanted to create from the very beginning of this work. That is possible, and that is fucking cool. This is how you teach your brain who you are becoming. Your nervous system, again, doesn't change through intention. It changes through repeated proof. It changes through action. And so repetition plus reinforcement equals identity change. My favorite word when it comes to goal setting or target setting and really success in general is clarity, because I believe there's a direct relationship between the level of clarity you have about who you are and what you want and virtually everything you accomplish in life. Successful people, whatever success might mean, but successful people in general invest the time necessary to develop absolute clarity about themselves and what they really want. It's like designing a detailed blueprint for a building before you begin construction. That's what we are too. We are in construction always, all the time. This is an endlessly evolving process. And so, one of the most important questions in goal or target setting is this: what do I really want with my life? If I could do or be or have anything at all in life, what would it be? Right? You should return to this question over and over and over again in the months and years ahead so you can get clarity, extreme clarity about who you are and what you really want and the daily actions and steps that you can take to get there. So clarity is very important. That's why it's sort of the starting point for everything that we're going to talk about in terms of target or goal setting, because your direction is more important than your speed. You need to know what direction you're headed in. That's why I really like the word target setting, because you know what your target is, you know where your aim is. Now, what's totally in your control each and every day to get you closer and closer to that target? Because largely goals are out of our control, right? Of course, there's a lot of things that we can actually do, which we're going to deeply discuss, that are totally in your control, but your direction is more important than your speed. And so you want to know where you're headed. That's your target. That's your aim. Now, what can I do every single day to get me closer to those targets? That's really important. So really, this is a target setting masterclass, but about goals, of course, just using a different word. And so then the next thing we want to think about is the word confidence. Confidence literally means intense trust in oneself. So therefore, self trust is the foundation of greatness, right? So you have confidence means intense trust in oneself. Then you have self trust being that foundation for greatness or becoming the best version of yourself in greatest service to the world. And self trust comes from listening to your intuition, to your still sort of small voice within you. You know, most people begin to become great when they begin to listen to their inner voices and absolutely trust that they are being guided by a higher power each step of the way. And that only happens through building up your self-trust. And the way you build your self-trust is through evidence, is through doing what you say you're going to do. Because if confidence means intense trust in oneself, and self-trust is the foundation for confidence, the only way you can build that confidence, that real, genuine confidence or trust in oneself, is doing what you say you're going to do. And that starts with keeping the little promises you make to yourself. Confidence is built on evidence, it's built on receipts, and those receipts build that trust within yourself. And then that self trust becomes the foundation of your greatness, and therefore the foundation of achieving the targets that you set out for in your life. And so then we think about living in alignment with your true values is really that royal road to self-confidence, self-respect, and personal pride. In fact, I think almost every human problem potentially can be resolved by returning to values. Whenever you experience stress of any kind, look into yourself and ask, in what way am I compromising my innermost values in this situation? So that's really important, living in alignment with those core values, those true values, those first principles. And then, yeah, again, if you're experiencing any stress of any kind, ask that question: in what way am I compromising my innermost values in this situation? And so then with that, we have a few more questions that I think are deeply, deeply important and profound in terms of making sure you're headed in the right direction, making sure your target is appropriate for you and what you really want and how it aligns with your values. And so, who are you? Who are you? What do you really want in your life? And based on that, what are your top 5 values or top 5 first principles or top 5 characteristics? Mine are honesty, honesty, consistency, resilience, zest, and hope. Those are my core values. Now I can add a few other ones, but like zest and consistency are my top two. I want to live life with zest, with energy, with enthusiasm, and I want to be as consistent as humanly possible, whether that's as a husband, a father, or in my job. And I want to bring zest to all of those things. I want to be a zesty and energetic and enthusiastic husband and father, and I want to bring zest to my work, and I want to be as consistent as possible. So those are my top 5 values, but my top 2 values and who I really want to be on a day-to-day basis is consistent and zesty. And so based on that, what are your top 5 values or first principles or core values or characteristics? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to what do you want to stand for, right? What do you really stand for? That's another important question to ask yourself. What do you really stand for? So the questions we've asked so far is like, who are you? And that's based on what you really want in your life. That's based on your top 5 values, and that's based on what you really stand for. And that makes you think of the sort of the another characteristic called identity, right? Your identity really is your repeated beingness. It's who you're being on a consistent basis. Your identity isn't your job, isn't how much you produce. That's not who you are. Who you are is the values that you represent. Who you are is how you make people feel. Who you are is what you stand for. Who you are is what you represent. When people talk about me, I want them to say, yeah, Aaron is consistent. He's honest. He's resilient. He's zesty. Like that's who I really am. Now I apply those values as a husband, a dad, as a podcaster, whatever the case may be. But that's who I really am. That's my identity, is my repeated beingness. Who am I being on a consistent basis? And we can act like the best version of ourselves on the most consistent basis if we know what our actual values are. And our values really do determine the direction we're headed in, and really do determine if we actually achieve the goals we set out in life. And that's really important when it comes to target or goal setting, which is what this whole episode is about. And so then you have those questions. And then based on those questions, describe your vision of an ideal person, the person you would most want to be. Really describe it. Really describe. We have one more question, and then I'll encourage you to kind of pause and reflect and journal, and then come back to this episode when you've actually done that work. Because this is not just like things that we talk about, right? This is real proactive action that you can take to really find a robust sense of self so you can actually achieve the things you want going into wherever you're going and going into the next year, next month, or next 3 years, or whatever the case may be. And so the next sort of reflection journal prompt would be to write your own obituary to be read by your friends and family at your own funeral. For what qualities do you want to be remembered? What core values, what principles, what characteristics do you want to be remembered? So you have those questions and reflections to now ponder. So I would pause this episode right here, right now, take out a journal and start really digging deep into these questions, and then come back when you've sort of written something down, you've reflected, because we know experience plus reflection equals growth. Then come back to this episode and we're going to dig even deeper. So as we continue moving forward, these are a couple quotes that I think sort of round out what we're really trying to say here is, he who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. That's Friedrich Nietzsche. I think I say his last name right. It is what it is. And then the next one is, find something you would die for and live for it. That's S.K. and Diamandis, something like that. Those are just quotes, right? Not from my original thought, but those people really sort of summed up what I'm trying to talk about here. And so now we've had those ideas. We're talking about clarity and confidence and who you are and your core values and your identity and all that type of stuff. And it leads to looking at two different types of motivation. Two different types of motivation. You have one being intrinsic motivation, which is really doing any activity simply for the enjoyment of the activity itself, rather than the instrumental or material value that you might get from it. And then you have extrinsic motivation, doing an activity in order to attain some separable outcome or thing. Now, yes, of course, we want to be intrinsically motivated. That is the sort of the best source of motivation that we can have. But there are going to be times in our life where we need the sense of activation energy to get us off our ass. And to get us off our ass, we can use a bit of extrinsic motivation. We can use that sort of outcome in the future to get us off our ass, to get us going. And then over time, as we start to change and grow and evolve, it's going to switch to intrinsic motivation. Yeah, if you're a young man and you want to get your shit together and your extrinsic motivation is, I want to have sex with girls, great. You're going to have hygiene and go to the gym and have financial prospects and kind of start dressing well. And then over time, you're going to feel as, oh, this feels better for me. My mental and my emotional state feels more clear and calm and connected. And I'm actually succeeding and doing things I want to do. Yeah, I still want to be attract the right girls and things of that nature. But I'm doing this now because I enjoy it. It makes me feel good. It makes me live a better life. It's switched from extrinsic motivation, sort of activation energy, into intrinsic motivation. And you can say that for anything, right? You want to look better in your bikini. Okay, that's a bit extrinsic, right? We have a goal, a separate outcome to obtain. That's going to get us off our ass, get us eating well, moving well, sleeping well, thinking well. But then over time, we're going to say, oh, when I eat well and move well and sleep well and think well, I feel better. I live better. I communicate better. I move through the day better. I'm a better mom or husband or whatever the case may be. And so it can definitely start as extrinsic motivation. Don't listen to anyone who tells you that it has to be intrinsic. It always, no, it's maybe 80% of the time it should potentially be intrinsic motivation. That's a good source of motivation because you're going to do what you're supposed to do sort of regardless of how you feel because you enjoy doing the activity itself. If you're only extrinsically motivated and that reward never comes, you're going to stop doing that thing. But it's okay to use extrinsic motivation as a source of activation energy to get you off your ass and get you moving in the right direction. That's why we need that target. That's why we're talking about target setting and goals and who you are and where you want to go and what you want to be and clarity behind it. And so your motivation is going to obviously be an important part of that. And so we know that motivation, that word, comes and goes. It's sort of fleeting. That's why you want to lean more on discipline and you want to lean more on intrinsic motivation because extrinsic motivation can be very fleeting, but you want to catch it in the bottle, get yourself moving in that direction, and then switch it over to discipline and intrinsic motivation. That's important to understand sort of the difference between those. And then when we do get to intrinsic motivation, we want to start stacking it. We want to stack our intrinsic motivation so we can follow our biology. And so it starts with like autonomy, right? Which is like the freedom to pursue your purpose, right? We have that autonomy. Human beings are unbelievable creatures because we have agency, and that agency leads to autonomy, which means we have the freedom to pursue our purpose. And so then when we know we have autonomy, let's go to mastery. Mastery is learning the skills to pursue that purpose. You're probably asking, what is my purpose? Okay, we're going to get there in a second. And then after autonomy and mastery, we have just curiosity. Curiosity is sort of the basic fuel. This podcast is built on sort of the byproduct of pain and curiosity. That's my fuel for wanting to have conversations and learn more things and express my ideas, hopefully in a cohesive and valuable way, right? So curiosity is that basic fuel. And then you move on to passion. What's your passion? Passion is like the intersection of multiple curiosities. Again, that's this podcast. I'm super curious in human beings and the texture of our mind and how great people are great. And I'm also curious in pain and story and narrative. And I'm also, those are all my curiosities. And so my passion is this podcast. And that's the intersection of multiple curiosities. So this is just how you can sort of get into your purpose. Now, that's the last one. Purpose is your passion plus a cause bigger than yourself. And so a lot of people want to find their purpose and it takes time, it takes effort, it takes experience. But here are a couple things that you can start to think about that might help you round out your purpose a little bit as you start to think about your target, your goals, where you want to go, who you are, and get more clarity on the situation so you can actually attack, becoming the best version of yourself in greatest service to the world with some actual intensity and clarity. And so we think about our massive transformative purpose. That's what I call it. You can call it just your purpose. You can call it your North Star. You can call it whatever you want. I call it my massive transformative purpose. I learned this from the Flow Research Collective as an amazing course that I took on flow. And they talk about your MTP, your massive transformative purpose. So you want to dial in your MTP basically for limitless fuel. If you know what your MTP is, you're going to be intrinsically motivated. You're going to have the discipline to do what you're supposed to do, regardless of how you feel, because you know what your massively transformative purpose is and what you're basically designed to do on this planet. And so I'm going to pause there for a second because I need a drink of water. And so It's really thinking about like the alchemy of passion into purpose through your massively transformative purpose. And so here's an exercise you could potentially do. Now you have that journal from those reflection questions above that I told you to pause at. Here's another thing that you can actually write down, think about, and look at and use to find your MTP. So first thing is write down like 10 to 15 sort of massive global challenges. Not very hard. There's a lot of challenges in the world, right? So 10 to 15 massive global challenges. Write them down. Hunger, energy scarcity, biodiversity, cancer prevention, suicide prevention, whatever it is. Write down 10 to 15 massive global challenges. Then the second part after it, number 2, is like be very hyper specific about one of the challenges and what you might want to do with it. So if you're thinking about like protecting biodiversity, right, it would be establishing mega linkages to protect biodiversity. If you're thinking about suicide prevention, like I do on a regular basis, it would be like establishing proactive measures to reduce suicide numbers, especially in men, right? And so you have these 10 to 15 massive global challenges. Then you have hyper specific sort of thing that's linked to those massive challenges. And then the third thing would be to tie these specific global challenges to your passion. So your passion, right, is just like the intersection of a bunch of different curiosities, right? We talked about curiosity being the basic fuel and then passion being the intersection of those multiple curiosities. Now you have 10 to 15 global challenges. You're hyper specific on some of those global challenges that sort of mean something to you. Again, like suicide prevention, whatever it might be for you, just giving an example for me personally. And then you tie those global challenges to your passion. And then you start to think, reflect, and you have those sort of 3 sort of prompts that we just discussed. And then the fourth idea then would be to use that information to craft your massively transformative purpose, which should be one sentence. My massive transformative purpose is to end mental suffering. I've constructed that. It's been my massive transformative purpose for, 4 or 5 years now. My sister passed away in 2018. Took me a few years to sort of figure my life out. And then this podcast and then everything that I've done in my mental health nonprofit and all that stuff has led to me thinking about my massive transformative purpose as ending mental suffering. Now, what it is for you, I just gave you sort of an exercise to really think about it, to dial in on it. It could change throughout your life, different seasons, different things happen. I didn't ever know that this was going to be my MTP, but it is. And this is how I have sort of a limitless fuel to produce and work and engage and learn and grow and fall and stumble and all these types of things because I know what my ultimate purpose is and why I'm here on this planet. And so you can use those 4 steps, like I just outlined, to discover what your MTP is. And then when you do, let's double check it. Let's double check your MTP, right? First question to ask when you think you have your MTP is it massive? It's a massive transformative purpose. You may never see this thing happen in your lifetime. I don't ever like before I die, like mental suffering will not be ended, right? But my goal is to like have moved the needle forward enough where my life had so much purpose and passion because I was following that thing that I just lived with this zest. And so is it massive? Is your MTP actually massive, right? Audaciously big and aspirational. Like most likely when you go through this exercise the first time, you should probably 10x it. Probably 10x it. You can do it. 10x it. Is it transformative? Can cause significant transformation to an industry, community, to the world, to the planet, whatever it is. Is it transformative? And then the last, probably most important question is it purposeful? A clear why behind it that you're actually passionate about in this season of your life, right here, right now, after thinking about your core values and who you are and your identity and your clarity and your confidence, all of that leading into this purpose, a clear why behind it that you're passionate about, something that really unites and inspires action from you and from the people around you. So that's how you discover your massively transformative purpose. And that's your lifetime goal. May never get achieved, but that's the target you're aiming at. So you know the direction you're going in. That's why I love the word target. So now you know every action, decision, uh, value, goal, whatever is based around this transformative purpose, and you're heading in that direction. That's your target. That's a beautiful thing to have to give your life more meaning and fulfillment and joy. And so then we think like, okay, what are the high, hard goals? Those are like your 1 to 10 year span. Those are your 1 to 10 year span. Those are still targets. I like to call them high hard targets. Like, what am I actually going to achieve in the next 1 to 10 years? Let's try to write that down. Let's make that happen. So we're moving in that direction. But the umbrella lifetime goal is that MTP. And then you have your operational chunked targets or goals, which is weeks to months. And then you have your clear goals or your clear targets, which is today, which is totally in your control. So we have all these things broken down from, the MTP to the high hard goals, to the chunked goals, to the clear goals being your daily process, your daily actions, the things that are fully within your control that you can do every single day that are going to move the needle towards your ultimate target, your ultimate North Star, or your ultimate MTP, or whatever goal you're headed at, right? We want to think about the clear goals and the clear targets, and we'll talk more about systems here later on in this episode, but just know that those daily targets are super important. So the MTP. Now we're largely forgetting about it because we know where we're headed. So we're using the values and the clarity and the confidence and the daily actions and the process and the systems to get us there each and every single day because we know that's totally within our control. And so you just want to stack little wins, little victories, right? That's the formula for plasticity. And then plasticity is the formula for expanded capacity, and clarity is passion and purpose, right? We talked about clarity, right? That's your passion, your purpose. That's what you're crystal clear on. That's who you are, where you want to go, and what you're thinking about. And then that expands your capacity even more. And that expanded capacity leads to you thinking about your clear targets, and your clear targets and your shared vision with yourself and those around you equals a flow trigger. And if you get into flow, that's the most optimal state a human being can be in. And that's when we just feel limitless. So all of these things stack up. You have little wins, which leads to plasticity. Plasticity leads to you having expanded capacity, right? Knowing that you have clarity over your passion and your purpose leads to, plus your expanded capacity leads to a very clear vision of your targets, which leads to you getting into flow more often. And ask any athlete on the face of the earth, right? Flow is the best state we can possibly be in. We feel limitless. We feel unbelievably great. This is the best state a human being can be in. And it only happens if we're very clear on our targets and goals. That is a flow trigger. And so, extremely important. Pause there for some water. And then I've talked about this a lot on quite a few episodes, but I think it's very relevant for our goals masterclass, our target masterclass, which is like a daily and weekly reflection. And it's very simple. 3 questions you can ask yourself. It's called Well, Better, How. You want to do this at the end of each day, or at the end of each week, to understand how we're doing, log ourselves, and think about where we can improve, where we can improve. This is episode 445 of this podcast. Episode 441, if you want to go back a few episodes, was my sort of annual review reflection episode, and I talked deeply about weekly reflections, daily reflections, leading into our yearly reflections. And so we want to have a weekly reflection process that allows us to keep improving over time. And you're just going to ask yourself 3 simple questions: what went well, or what was awesome this week? What do I need to improve upon? 1 to 2 things. What needs work? And the third question is, like, what can I do to make those things happen? What action steps can I do to make those things happen? So if we're doing a weekly or daily reflection, which we're logging in our journal, which allows us then to actually do a reflection, a deep reflection at the end of each year, because we know that experience plus reflection equals growth. Then we have all of this logged. Then when we go to the episode that I do on, yearly reflection, we actually have some information to use as fuel for our growth heading into the next year, the next quarter, or whatever the case may be. And so 3 questions again: what went well or what went awesome? As many things as humanly possible. What needs work? A couple things. And then what action steps am I going to take to improve upon those things? And so that's really important. And then thinking about how we're going to make those things happen. Probably the single most important quality for success is self-discipline. I mentioned one of my favorite words in success is clarity, and we talked about why, but how do we make that happen? Well, we generally make that happen through self-discipline, or through discipline itself, right? Self-discipline or discipline means that you have the ability within yourself, based on your strength of character and willpower, to do what you should do when you should do it, whether you feel like it or not. That's disciplined. doing what you should do, when you should do it, whether you feel like it or not. And so having the character then is the ability to follow through on a resolution or a target or something you said you're going to do after the enthusiasm with which the resolution was made has passed. We talked about confidence being intense trust, self-trust being the foundation for greatness, and confidence being built through evidence and doing what you say you're going to do. Well, here is that stamped again with character. Character being the ability to follow through on a resolution after the enthusiasm from which you made that resolution has passed. And so it's not what you learn that is like decisive for your future. It is whether or not you can have the discipline yourself to pay the price over and over and over and over until you finally obtain the objective. That is it, right? That is the discipline you need to pay the price over and over and over again until you finally obtain the objective or reach the target or get the goal or whatever the case may be. And it's about persisting until you succeed. It's about persisting until you succeed. That's why having that clear, very clear target is super important, because there's going to be times where you don't feel like it, or you get knocked down, or it's like there's a lot of challenges and setbacks and things suck and this is not going well and everything's going against you and it's fucking horrible. And there's going to be times like that. But if you truly know that this thing is what I want to do, this is what I'm very, very clear on, and I'm heading in this direction, that I'm going to persist until I succeed. Because persistence is self-discipline in action, and the true measure of your belief in yourself, right? Resolve in advance that you will never, ever give up. Feel that, hear that. Persistence is self-discipline in action and the true measure of your belief in yourself. Resolve in advance, right now, right here with me, that you will never, never give up, because we have to accept the cost of our goals. We have to accept the cost of our goals. There will be a price of action and inaction. So you think not doing the thing is going to be easier? There are consequences to action. There are consequences to inaction. Choose your hard. Not doing the thing is going to be hard. Doing the thing is going to be hard. Choose your hard. So if you really get clear, if you're super clear on these goals, you're super clear on these goals or these targets or your MTP or what direction you're headed in, okay, we have to accept the cost. What's the price you have to pay? What's the price you have to pay? What do you need to cut off? And what does it look like for you to pay it daily? Those are, again, another 3 questions that you want to ask yourself and reflect upon in your journal to keep getting clearer and clearer and clear on what you're actually willing to do to accomplish these goals. Because that's very important. Very important. And then the next sort of topic we want to discuss before we do that, I'm taking another drink of water, talking a lot, is hope. I love the word and the science behind hope. It's super powerful, it's super practical, and it makes a ton of sense. What is hope? Hope essentially is you can get from there, or you can get there from here. Excuse me, let me say that again. What is hope? Hope is super practical, and the science behind hope is unbelievable. I know I just said that, but I'm saying it again, and here's what I actually meant to say what hope is. You can get there from here. You can get there from here. Here is the present, which in some ways potentially is less desirable than our imagined future. There is the target of our longing. There is the target we're headed at. And you are the one moving yourself from here right now to there. That's what we're talking about, target setting and having hope for that. We expect something from the future and also from ourselves. And so in our minds, our beliefs firm up links between ourselves and the future, priming people for hope. People do this by setting high expectations about the future, somewhat tempered in reality, of course, and then acting on them, right? The hopeful, hopeful people in your life. I'm sure you do. I'm a very hopeful person, and I've built that into my life because there's a science behind being hopeful. All right. Again, what is hope? Right. You can get there from here, here being the present, there being your imagined future. And we're having clarity on that imagined future through all the questions that we've been asking ourselves today. And so the hopeful core, the hopeful share very core beliefs that set them apart from others. Two of them are, the two most important are, the future will be better than the present, and I have the power to make it so. We talked about autonomy and agency and power, and like this is it right here. The future can be better than the present, and I have the power to make it so. And then on top of that, we talk about three primary aspects of making that happen. Here they are. One is goals or targets, what we've been talking about this whole time, right? You need to have a future there that fires you up. That's why we talked about clarity and purpose and passion and your MTP, right? That's the target in the distance that you're headed at. That's your goal, your target, and it fires you the fuck up. You need that for hope. And then, of course, you have agency. You have agency. You need to believe that you have the power to make that future reality. And you absolutely do. We talked about self-trust and confidence and some of those things that matter in terms of you creating that agency and creating that evidence that you are who you say you are, that you can do the thing you're trying to do. And you have that belief that you can make that future a reality, which you absolutely can. You absolutely can. I believe in you. Let's start believing in yourself. And then the third part is pathways. You need to know that there's a bunch of ways to reach your goal, aka right here to there, and that none of these paths will be free from obstacles. None of them. You might have path A, path B, all the way down to path C, and they're all going to be filled with obstacles and challenges and setbacks and all these types of things. That's why the target is so important, that it fires you the fuck up, that no matter what happens, no matter what obstacle knocks you down, you're getting back up, you're learning, you're bouncing forward through a resilient mindset, and you're continuing on a different pathway and a different pathway and a different pathway and a different pathway. And eventually, boom, you're moving in the right direction on a consistent basis. And then maybe eventually, yeah, you reach your goal, whatever it is, right? Or you just keep moving forward for the rest of your life as an ever improving, endlessly evolving process. But that's what pathways is, right? Obstacles make me stronger. That's what we have to think about when we know we're headed into the jungle, into the trenches. Like life is the trenches, and we claw ourselves out and we learn and we grow and we evolve, and then we fall back in and we crawl ourselves out and we learn, and we grow and we evolve. That's the whole deal. And so hopeful people have three primary aspects. They have goals or targets, they have agency, and they have pathways. That's hope in a nutshell. And it's extremely powerful, especially when we feel like we're down and out and we have nothing left to give. We find that hope within us. We find that future reality that fires us up. We know we have the agency to make it happen, and we know we're going to have to take a bunch of different paths to get there, because we as human beings are teleological. What does that mean? Telos means ends or targets or goals, as we've been talking about. And so we need to be aiming at something. We are teleological. We have to be aiming at something. That's again why I love the word targets as a replacement for goals, because we're headed in that direction. We're aiming at something, and it's giving us this fire in our belly that we are capable of something great, which we absolutely are. And so when we think, okay, so goals are important for hope, and hope is important for our targets. So they all go hand in hand and they mesh together to create this sort of best version of you. And so then we think of the word prosperity. Prosperity. Prosperity comes from the Latin root, which literally translates to according to hope, or to go forward hopefully. Thus, love that word. This is a quote. Thus, it is not so much a condition in life as it is an attitude toward life. The truly prosperous person is what psychologist Rollo May calls the fully functioning person. That's prosperity. Prosperity, the word literally means to go forward with hope. It is not so much a condition of life, but as an attitude towards it. That is beautiful. Prosperity, prosperity, prosperity. Let's move forward with hope. And now we know the science behind hope, so we can actually be prosperous in this world, and we can actually move forward with hope. And so I love that word prosperity and just the actual literal meaning behind it, and how it links so good with the science of hope. And so I've mentioned this sort of 3-word phrase a couple times throughout this episode, but here it is sort of explained in detail. We are an endlessly evolving process. We are an endlessly evolving process, as in, we need to embrace the fact that a good life is, and every project or thing and relationship within that good life is an endlessly evolving process. Everything, everything is that. And so endlessly meaning is it will never end, ever. No exoneration for you, my friend. Even if you feel like you've done all the work, it's still endlessly evolving, whether it's in a marriage, whether it's not. Like my marriage with my wife is endlessly evolving. I'm working hard every single day to be the best husband I can possibly be. I'm a dad now doing the same thing there. It's endlessly, it never, ever ends. And that's the beautiful part about being human, of course, until we die. And we will, all of us will die. And so it's evolving. And the whole point of life is to actualize our potential, AKA, right, to evolve into the next best version of ourselves. So how long does that go on? Endlessly. It's endlessly evolving. And then process. It's all one big flowing process, which is why if we want to love life, we better fall in love with the process of evolving endlessly rather than obsess about and get attached to the outcomes of that process, right? We know our MTP. We know what that is, our massive transformative purpose. We have that target. Now we largely forget about it and focus on those clear daily goals or actions that are going to get us there, the things that are totally within our control. We have to fall in love with that process because it's endlessly evolving and it's beautiful. And it's the best chance we have of actually reaching that target rather than obsessing and getting attached to the outcome. That's super important. That's why I talk about the endlessly evolving process. So, to sort of wrap up this whole thing, it really boils down to wishing versus deciding. That's what it boils down to. You've heard this whole thing, this whole episode, and now it boils down to wishing versus deciding. The key difference when we decide, we get clear on what we want and we get clear on the price we'll need to pay. Then we get busy paying it over and over and over again. We talked about the process. So now we must create systems that get there. When we make that decision, we decide. And then we need to create the systems to get there. So right now, you're hearing this, you're watching this, whatever the case may be, you're making that decision. You're making that decision to get clear on what you want, and then you're going to go and pay that price every single day. And then we're going to create the systems or the processes that get us there. And so we obviously need goals or targets, but we should word glue them together so we have target systems or system goals or process oriented outcome or whatever it is, right? It's based on the systems and the process. We have the targets, we have the goal, we have the targets, we have the goals, and we have to attach them to the actual systems, processes, and clear daily actions that we're going to take. That is what is actually going to move the needle forward. If all we do, if all we're doing is chasing a goal, we're constantly going to be losing because the goal is always some far off spot we never reach. On the other hand, I'm getting a little fired up. On the other hand, when we figure out the systems or the process, we're constantly winning every single time we execute the system. That's why we want to stay focused solely on what's in our control so we can consistently win, stack those wins, compound interest over time, and eventually we get closer and closer and closer and closer to our target. And we're evolving in the process endlessly because we're becoming the best version of ourselves in greatest service to the world. And so, for example, to try to get clear on it, if you're trying to lose 20 pounds, you have a goal, you have a target. Great. Eating right is a system. Trying to run a 4-hour marathon is a goal. Exercising every day is a system. Right? What's totally within your control? It's eating well, moving well, sleeping well, and thinking well. Those are totally within your control. That's part of the system. What are the non-negotiables I can do every single day? Boom, that's the system I can construct to lead me towards my target of losing 20 pounds. And so a system is something you do on a regular basis that increases your odds of happiness or target setting in the long run. If you do something every day, it's a system. If you're waiting to achieve it someday in the future, it's a goal. That's why I use target and have clear targets each day in my control that become my system or process that bring me closer to my massive transformative purpose or whatever word you want to use to describe it. And so we know that leadership guru John Maxwell has a great way to describe systems as well. He says that systems are good strategies repeated. Think of someone, name someone truly great without self discipline, because you will never change your life until you change something you do daily. That means developing great habits. And discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishments, or targets and accomplishments. And that bridge must be crossed every single day. You are never exonerated from the work. And so over time, that daily crossing, though, does become a habit, or it runs on autopilot, like for someone like Jocko Willink, right? And ultimately, people do not decide their future, they decide their habits, and their habits decide their future. Hear that one more time. Ultimately, people do not decide their future, they decide their habits, or what they do daily, and those daily actions or habits decide their future. And then I think a really important thing to just note as we dive into behavior change and things of that nature, we are not the problem. You and I, we are not the problem. Our approach to change is the problem. It's a design flaw, not a personal flaw. And I think that's very empowering. So maybe you haven't hit the goals or the targets or don't have the habits you want in your life right now. So you are not the problem. Your systems, your protocols, and your approach to change is that problem. So it's a design flaw. And hopefully, throughout this episode, I can teach you the appropriate way to design your habit change so you can live the life that you want and become the best version of yourself in greatest service to the world. And so, if you're having trouble changing your habits, again, the problem isn't you, the problem is your system. Bad habits repeat themselves again and again and again, not because you don't want to change, but because you have the wrong system for change. Hear that? Really, really let that sink in, right? Because as James Clear states, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, because it's so easy to overestimate the importance of one defining moment and underestimate the value of making small improvements on a daily basis. We know that, I think Tony Robbins said that people, overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in 5 years. Have a longer term vision of who you are and who you could be and where you could be if you really, really implement the right systems to create the behavior change that you want. And so improving 1% or whatever small, tiny improvement you want to think of isn't right particularly notable. Sometimes it isn't even noticeable, but it can be far more meaningful, especially in the long run. Like I'm saying, right? The difference a tiny improvement can make over time is astounding. Instead of 1 year, we think 5 years. Instead of 2 weeks, we think 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 9 months. That is real, really where the change happens, right? Habits are the compound interest of self improvement. The same way, right? Money multiplies through compound interest. The effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them, whether they're good or bad habits. That's why we want to create good habits and delete or reinstall the good habits over the top of them. I mean, a lot of things in life, I would say habit change included, are really about quitting things that no longer serve you rather than adding things that you think are going to help you, right? The fastest way to improve your life is to stop doing the things that make you feel like shit. And that's an important reminder as we get deeper and deeper into this episode. Again, all about habit change and habits 101. So we think they seem to make, these habits, they seem to make little difference on any given day, yet the impact they deliver over the months and years is absolutely enormous. It is only when looking back, right, to 5 or perhaps even 10 years later that we see the value of good habits, and the cost, the real cost of bad ones becomes strikingly apparent. So I think that's an important information. And of course, there's always this idea of willpower. And there's this sort of analogy that you want to buy your willpower at the store. What does that mean? That means if your habit that you want to create, again, deeper in this episode, we're going to talk about behavior change. We're just really sort of creating the foundational aspects of what that might be and how important our habits are. And so you want to buy your willpower at the store. What does that mean again? So let's say I want to eat less sugar. Well, if I still have sugar in my house, it's going to be very hard. And I have to employ my willpower every single time I open the cabinet not to eat the sugar. But what if I go to the store and I don't buy any sugar? So there's no sugar in my house. So I'm buying that willpower at the store. Again, another example might be I don't want to grab my phone immediately when I wake up. So how do I buy my willpower at the store? Well, I put my phone in another room downstairs in a box. And so when I do wake up and I have that sort of habitual autopilot habit to go grab my phone, it's not there. And so I've bought my willpower at the store. So you don't have to keep employing this sort of this finite resource of a willpower. And then it gets drained, it gets drained. Then when we're tired or we're hungry or we had a bad day, we immediately fall back into that unhealthy habit that we're trying to break because we didn't buy our willpower at the store. And it really starts with the fundamentals. And I talk about this in almost every single podcast episode. So it's paramount, again, that I talk about here on this one about habits. But the fundamentals of being a human being are eating well, moving well, sleeping well, and thinking well. And if we can really crush and dominate those four fundamentals, our willpower will increase, our discipline will increase, the habits we have will increase. Everything will be much better because we've built a foundational piece. The strongest foundation we can possibly build is dialing in on our eating, our moving, our sleeping, and our thinking. And then to really hash that out about maybe what you need to do to figure out how to make that a non-negotiable in your life, ask yourself three questions. What do I need to start doing? What do I need to stop doing? And what should I continue doing? Right? Again, the fastest way to improve your life is to stop doing the things that make you feel like shit. So pick one thing you want to stop doing. Pick one thing you want to start doing that you know is good for you, and then congratulate or reinforce the behavior that you are doing, that you want to continue, that you want to repeat. So start, stop, continue is a good place to start thinking about sort of habit change, what you want to install, what you want to delete. And then we're going to get more into, again, discipline. We're going to get more into behavior change, the laws of behavior change from BJ Fogg and James Clear and all these types of things. But the next idea is diving deeper into discipline and thinking about the three disciplines of self mastery. You have structural discipline, reactive discipline, and expansive discipline. Let me quick take a drink of water and then we'll get into structural discipline. Actually, that's element, not just water. Got to drink your salt, more salt, not less. All right. So we got structural discipline is the first of the three disciplines of self mastery. So, structural discipline, the questions that you need to ask yourself are who are you at your absolute best? What virtues do you embody? And what do you actually do on a daily basis? When we have structural discipline, think of structure, right? We dominate that protocol, we dominate our protocols, we recommit to being our best selves in the morning, then we hit our targets all day, every day. That's the idea, right? I promise you, good fucking luck. Good luck having a series of really bad days when you do that, when you recommit or just ultimately commit or ultimately decide that this is the person that you want to be. Your highs will be higher and your lows will be higher, and you'll have earned the trust in yourself to know that you can handle whatever life throws at you, which is the essence of confidence, right? That's how you forge true anti-fragile confidence, by executing your protocols via this structural discipline, right? Confidence is earned. Confidence needs receipts. And that's what you do. You're executing your protocols. The most high performers on the planet do this one thing. They do what they say they're going to do. They keep the little promises you make to yourself. And that's the idea of structural discipline. And so then we move on to the second discipline, which is reactive discipline. Reactive discipline. So reactive, right? Something triggers you. Can you step in between the stimulus and your normal sort of suboptimal response with the discipline? That's why it's reactive discipline, to choose a better response. This is what I teach my athletes all the time. If you want to be one of the best performers in whatever domain, parenting, business, sport, you always have control over your response, and you can either spiral down or you can spiral up. Understanding our reactive discipline, now we have the choice to have a better response, is the discipline to choose a better way forward. Something triggers us, Don't love that word, but something triggers us, something sets us off, some obstacle, setback, challenge happens. Okay, can I step in between that stimulus and how I normally respond, sort of Viktor Frankl style, and have the discipline, the reactive discipline to choose a better response? Yes, you can, through your breathing, through your body language, through your self talk, through the things that you ultimately have control over, because there's so much in this world that we don't have control over. So why don't we dominate the protocols and the things that we do have control over, right? I talked about the fundamentals: eating, moving, sleeping, thinking. Dominate those because we have control over them. Okay, well, let's also control the things that we have power over, which is our attitude, our effort, and our response, really dialed into this reactive discipline. A little bit of cup of coffee left, so let's drink that. All right, so then we move on to the third discipline, which is expansive discipline. I love this one. This is both I think, the most important and the hardest of the three disciplines, right? Because every single moment, we have a choice. Will we step forward into growth or back into safety? Forward into growth, back into safety. We have that choice. We have that power. So if you want to live, the most incredible, awesome, fulfilling, meaningful lives and have a shot at really experiencing all that you're capable of being, when we feel a little bit of fear, we must consistently choose to expand, expand, expand. Again, you're not going to get less scared, but you're going to get more brave. And you're going to give yourself the evidence that you can move forward into growth, that you can move forward into growth, that you can expand, expand, and expand, because you're not stepping back into safety, because you know what that feels like. You also know what it feels like to step forward into growth. And yeah, you're still scared or nervous or whatever the case may be, but you're getting more brave because you have the evidence to say that you are who you say you are, and your confidence is growing, and your trust in yourself is growing. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's what we need to do. We need to make that expansive, of that expansion, excuse me, a discipline. We need to make that expansion a discipline. So again, you have the three disciplines of self-mastery, which are structural, reactive, and expansive. We know, as we stated at the beginning, right, discipline equals freedom, Jocko Willink style, and discipline is the bridge between your targets and actually accomplishing the things that you set out to do. So it's important to understand some of those different elements of discipline and how we can apply them to our lives. So now let's specifically get into behavior change and what we need to do about it. So we have behavior change, and we have this equation: B equals MAP. Behavior happens when motivation and ability and prompt converge in the same moment. That's why it's B equals MAT. So we want to understand why we do anything and everything. Well, we need to understand the simple formula of behavior equals motivation, ability, and prompt converging in the same moment. Behavior is a function of our motivation, our ability, and our prompt. That is what behavior change is all about. So BJ Fogg wrote this incredible book that I think is better than James Clear's Atomic Habits. Both are great. Pick your poison, whatever you want. But BJ Fogg wrote this great book called Tiny Habits. The number one insight that I share on every episode is make your habits too small to fail, which we're going to get into later in this episode. But BJ Fogg tells us from that book, a behavior happens when the three elements of map, motivation, ability, and prompt come together at the same moment. Motivation is your desire to do the behavior, ability is your capacity to do the behavior, and the prompt is your cue to do the behavior. So that's why behavior equals motivation plus ability plus prompt. Motivation, your desire; ability, your capacity; and prompt is your cue. So then we go deeper into that idea of tiny habits. What is the anatomy of tiny habits? Again, I'm going to go back to this idea over and over and over and over and over again, because it's so important and it's so powerful, and it really could absolutely 100% change your life like it did mine. Make your habits too small to fail. That's why this is the anatomy of tiny habits. That's why BJ Fogg's book is called Tiny Habits. So you have one, you need an anchor moment. You need an anchor moment, an existing routine, whatever it is, like brushing your teeth, going to the bathroom, walking through a door, right? Or an event that happens to be potentially like your phone ringing or you getting a text. I don't really suggest using your phone. I suggest more like an existing routine of brushing your teeth, walking through a door, getting in the car, things of that nature, right? That's the anchor moment. Reminds you to do the new tiny behavior because it's anchored to an existing routine. And so then number two is have that new tiny behavior, a simple version of a new habit you want, such as flossing one tooth or doing one push-up. You do the tiny behavior immediately after the anchor moment. And then the third thing, maybe most important, is instant celebration. Something you do to create positive emotions, such as saying, I did a good job, or I tell my athletes that anytime they do something they said they were going to do, pat themselves on the back, do a little fist bump, and say, that's like me. That's instant celebration. That's like me. That's like me. That's like me to do my new habit. That's like me to wake up early and work out. That's like me to do one push up. That's like me to floss my tooth, right? You celebrate immediately after doing the new tiny behavior. So you have anchor, behavior, celebration. We want to make it really, really easy to win. Anchor the behavior to something you already do and then celebrate that tiny win. So again, you can also think like this is like an algorithm. If this, then what, right? But the tiny behavior is so important because you're making it too small to fail. So it's like, I want to start meditating. I want to start flossing. I want to start working out. Okay. I want to start doing all of those things. Fucking great. You can do it. Let's pick one thing at a time. And again, have a longer term vision from where we could be, not in this very moment, but in a year from now, right? Overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but totally underestimate what we can do in 5. So we can have all these habits dialed in 5 years. We just have to say we're going to give ourselves a long enough time to do that thing. And so again, you want to start flossing. Okay. So that the making that habit too small to fail, that tiny behavior is I'm going to floss one tooth 1 day a week and incrementally build from there. So if I brush my teeth, then I floss one tooth. If I brush my teeth, then I floss one tooth. I want to work out. Great. Eventually you can start working out 3 or 4 days a week. Let's start with one push-up 1 day a week. If I walk through a door, then I do a push-up. Okay, I want to start meditating. Great. Meditation 3 times a week for 20 minutes. Fuck yeah, you can do it. Let's start with one deep breath. Every time I walk through a door or every time I go to the bathroom, I take one deep breath. Then you just build. Then it's 2 push-ups, then it's 2 teeth, then it's 2 breaths. Boom, 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 boom. Where are you 6 months from now? That's the if this, then what? That's anchoring it to a anchoring it to an existing behavior, excuse me. That's the if this, like if I brush my teeth, existing behavior. If I walk through a door, existing behavior. If I go to the bathroom, existing behavior. Then I do this, tiny behavior, too small to fail. So you have this anchor moment, then you have the behavior, and have the celebration, saying, that's like me. That's like me to floss one tooth. That's like me to do the thing I said I was going to do. Bah, bang. Make it really fucking easy to win. Anchor that behavior to something you already do, and then celebrate those tiny wins. If this, then what? Making it too small to fail. And I promise you, I guarantee you, I'm going to say that 5 more times before this episode ends. So hopefully it just resonates with you and you go out and you pick that habit, start, stop, continue, start, stop, continue style that we already talked about earlier. You find those things that you want to add and delete and install, and you start fucking crushing it. Then I hear from you 6, 7, 8, 9 months from now, and you're like, boom, I installed the habits that I want. I removed some of the ones I didn't want, and I feel like the best version of me, like the best I've felt. And it's awesome. That's what fucking I want to hear. I want to hear all the success stories in the world, but we have to follow these specific protocols of behavior change. Because remember, you are not the problem. Your systems to change, your approach to change is the problem. And we're fixing it right here, right now through this episode, because there are 7 steps in the behavior design process. We talked about the anatomy of a tiny habit, right? Anchor, behavior, celebration. Now we're going to look a little bit more deeply into these 7 steps in behavior design process. So step 1, clarify the aspiration, aka what do you want to achieve? I recently did a full episode on goal setting or target setting. That masterclass should be definitely watched or listened to before you watch or listen to this one, right? They kind of go piggyback off of each other. So in my goal setting masterclass episode that I did, the most important thing that we talked about was clarity and asking ourselves the question, what do we really want? And so step 1 in the behavior design process is really getting clear on your aspiration. What do you want to achieve? What do you really want? Again, I really encourage you to go and listen or watch that episode. It's a goals masterclass, target setting masterclass. And then that will give you even more context to build into this episode, which again is all about habits. And so then we go into step 2, we explore behavior options, AKA like, what can you do to achieve that aspiration? We talked about hope in that goals masterclass. It's goals, agency, and pathways. So you have to explore some different behavior options. And then step number 3 is match with specific behaviors. Like, what specifically can you do? You have to get very, very clear, because I call them target setting, because your direction is more important than your speed. And then step 4, start tiny, like super fucking small. One tooth, one push-up, one deep breath, right? Super, super small. Make it easy to win at the beginning, and then incrementally build from there. And then step 5 is find a good prompt, right? Like, connect it to something you already do. Connect it to something you already do. Anchor that behavior, right? This is the behavior design process, which really, goes hand in hand with the anatomy of a tiny habit. And then step number 6, which we've talked about already with celebration, right? Celebrate successes. Again, you have to do this. Instant celebration. That's like me. That's like me. That's like me. Hack your brain's reward centers immediately and intensely. If you want to repeat something, you have to reward it. That's with yourself, with your partner, with anything in your life. If you want that behavior to be repeated, you have to reward it. That's why you celebrate that success. You celebrate the small wins. You celebrate instantly with a "that's like me" or "good job right there." Heck yeah, man, nice work. Boom, that's like me. Fist bump. Like, I'm an athlete, so I do a fist bump. Sometimes I imagine my teammates slapping me in the tush. Whatever. Right, whatever works for you, that's what you have to do. You have to celebrate instantly. And then step number 7 would be, right, troubleshoot, iterate, expand, review, reflect on the things that are working, that are not working, add stuff, delete stuff, throw some stuff out, right? Troubleshoot your process, make it work for you and your life and what you have to do if you're a dad or if you're a mom or if you have a business or if you're an entrepreneur, if you're single, if you're young, if you're old, right? Troubleshoot it so it works exactly for you in the context of your life, and then iterate, review, expand, and get to work. 1%, 1%, 1%, tiny habits, improvements, 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 compound, 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 boom. Now you've blossomed into the best version of yourself in greatest service to the world, and you've dialed in your behavior change process and your systems and your protocols. And now it's no longer it's no longer you. You're not the problem. You don't blame yourself anymore. Now you know what the deal is. You like, I can do this. I can install, I can delete, because I know the behavior change process and I know the systems that it takes to create the tiny habit. And so the 4 laws of behavior change uh, that are driven by those steps. So we just talked about the 7. So let's just review for a second, right? We talked about the anatomy of tiny habits, anchor, behavior, celebration. Then, to sort of piggyback off that, we went a little bit deeper and we did the 7 steps in the behavior design process. And then based on that, we have the 4 laws of behavior change that are driven by those steps. And these really come from James Clear. So let's see what he has to say to piggyback off of BJ Fogg's insight from Tiny Habits. So you have law number 1, again, make it obvious. James Clear tells us we can use implementation intentions, such as "I will meditate first thing in the morning in my bedroom." This is the if this, then what type of statement. I like to call them algorithms. James Clear likes to call them implementation intentions, but it doesn't matter. It's like, if I wake up in the morning, then I'll meditate. If I walk through a door, then I'll take a deep breath, right? That's like making it very, very obvious. James Clear notes that the when and where are super important. So be precise and increase the odds of crushing it. So again, make it obvious. Every time I walk through a door, I take a deep breath. Every time I brush my teeth, I floss one tooth. Every time I go to the bathroom, I do one push-up. That is law number 1, is make it obvious. And so you can also cue the obvious by designing your environment. People have heard this a lot, right? Perhaps you put the cushion you'll sit on your way from your bed to the bathroom so you trip over it. That's obvious. Or, you want to work out, so you put the gym clothes in the same spot so you see them, you look at them, you make it obvious. So You can make it obvious by these algorithms or these implementation intentions, or you can make it obvious by designing your environment, or you can do both to really better the odds that you're going to hit the mark. And so, law number 2 is make it attractive. Think about all the research demonstrating the benefits you want of exercise, of eating well, of sleeping well, of moving well, of prayer, of meditation, of anything that you want to start doing in your life. Think of all the research you've read or heard or studied of how this will make your life better and it will help you blossom into the best version of you in greatest service to the world. Right? You can also pair it with something you really enjoy doing, like drinking a cup of tea or coffee after you meditate. After I meditate, I drink my cup of coffee. Fuck yeah. I love drinking my coffee every morning. It's a ritual and routine for me. Just making it and drinking it is kind of like a meditative process for me, just in general. But make it attractive, right? Another good way is like to potentially join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. So that's also another way to make it attractive. Law number 3 is really the theme of this, is really the theme of Habits 101 or Habits Masterclass is like, make it easy. Easiest way to make it easy, downscale your habits until they can be done in 2 minutes or less. Make your habits too small to fail. James Clear says downscale your habits until they can be done in 2 minutes or less. BJ Fogg says make your habits too small to fail. Same idea, make it fucking easy to win. And then law number 4 is make it satisfying or create the instant celebration, right? Give yourself an immediate reward after doing your new habit. James Clear also tells us to never miss twice. Also, a recommendation from some habit people is to use a habit tracker, keep track of your habit streak, and don't break the chain. It's really important that you never miss twice. One day is going to happen, but twice, yeah, is what James Clear calls habit suicide. And so, again, those 4 laws are make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. Very similar to anchor, behavior, celebration, right? The sort of the nuts and bolts, the foundation of this habit change is anchor it to an existing routine. If this, then what? Make that habit or that new habit too small to fail, very tiny, downscale it as small as possible. And then after you do it, after you execute it, fucking celebrate. Instant celebration, reward that behavior so it gets repeated over time. And then after a while, it just runs on autopilot. This is something that you do. You are a person who works out. You're a person who meditates. Your identity is that thing now. You wake up early and you work out, or you eat right, or you get proper sleep, or you meditate twice a week, or you move your body daily. Like you are just that person now. And you still have to cross that bridge every single day via discipline, but it's not as hard because it's become part of your identity. It's become part of your being. And that's really what we want to get to when we think about behavior and habit change and implementing the right systems that make that actually possible. Quick drink of water. All right. So basically, to sum it all up, insert your desired behavior, right? We talked about those questions of start, stop, continue. Okay. And then we talked about in the goal setting masterclass, which is a previous episode, which again, I think you should really check out. We talk about getting clarity on our target. What do we really want? So answering all of those questions, we have that desired behavior that really feels like it's important to us. It's authentic to us. This is what we want. This is the desired behavior that we're going after. Okay, great. Then I'm going to follow the 4 laws. Perfect. And then maybe you're asking yourself, okay, how do I, delete a habit that I don't want? Well, you do the opposite for the stuff you want to get rid of, basically, right? To say it as simply as possible, you do the opposite for the stuff you want to get rid of. So let's do a quick walkthrough of a bad habit we like to break, just to understand the idea. So we have those 4 laws of behavior change. We're doing the opposite to break a habit that we don't want anymore, to sort of delete a habit that we don't want anymore. So first, we make it invisible, not obvious. We make it invisible, not obvious. How? Remember to buy your willpower at the store. That's what I said earlier, right? In other words, don't buy junk food and throw away what you have. Make it invisible. Why? Well, it's obvious insight. What do? You fucking eat it just like everyone else, right? If there's a cookie there and I don't want to eat cookies, I'm going to eat it. My best bet is to get rid of the thing, make it invisible, put a ton of friction in front of it, like make it hard to do the task. Again, phone in another bedroom, downstairs in a lockbox, right? All the sugary foods you want to eat in the fucking store, the convenience store. So you have to drive or get there, or call or do something that's just not like grab and eat or grab and look at your phone. So you want to make it invisible. Again, we ask these questions of start, stop, continue. What do you want to continue doing? Great. Continue doing that. Instant celebration, reward it, reward it, reward it. Then we want to stop doing something. This is how we stop doing it right here. We follow these 4 laws. And we want to start doing something. We've identified that desired behavior through clarity, through questions, through reflection. Boom. That's the desired behavior we want to start. Cool. This is the desired behavior we want to stop doing that we know is going to improve our life. So second, we make it unattractive. We make it unattractive. Reframe your mindset. Highlight the benefits of avoiding the bad habits. For example, imagine your energy stabilizing, your health optimizing if you were working out regularly or sleeping better or not checking your phone as much or eating better foods, right? Because we know earlier, right, when we looked at making it attractive, we were thinking about the research that's going to benefit us. So now we're doing that in the opposite regard. We're making it unattractive by thinking of the same research that we know is telling us how bad this thing is for us. And so that's going to make that habit unattractive. Intrinsically, we know that. We know these things are bad for us, but we need to highlight those unattractive behaviors and traits so that we can really get clear on why they're bad and how they're hurting us and our longevity and our lifespan and things of that nature. And so third is make it difficult. We know that we're trying to make the habits too small to fail. If we're really trying to install a new habit, we're trying to make it easy. If we're trying to delete an old habit that we keep doing, we want to make it hard. We want to make it difficult. We want to increase friction by increasing the number of steps between you and your bad habit. For example, for the most part, you need to drive to the grocery store to buy the junk food, or you need to get out of bed, walk all the way downstairs, open the lockbox, and grab your phone if your goal is to stop looking at your phone immediately when you wake up, right? So you make it difficult, you increase the friction, and you put as many steps or obstacles in the way between you and that bad habit, right? So again, to reiterate, first was make it invisible, second was make it unattractive, and third was make it difficult, right? As you can see, this is just the opposite of installing a good habit or installing a new behavior. This is the opposite, and we're deleting a bad habit or a bad behavior. And then fourth, we know that we want instant celebration if we're trying to install a good habit. If we're trying to delete a bad habit, the fourth thing is make it unsatisfying. Keep that reframe from above in mind and make the connection between your sort of your spike, your crash and energy levels and the junk food. And you're just making it unsatisfying. You don't want to feel like that at 2 p.m. where you have to crash, you have to get another energy drink and you don't do well at work. And then you have to stay up a little later because you had an energy drink later in the afternoon. Like think of all of these things that make it unattractive, that make it unsatisfying, that make it fucking really hard, that make it invisible. You want to put so much friction between you and that bad habit that eventually over time, you just stop doing it. Because we know, again, the fastest way to improve our life is to stop doing the things that make us feel like shit. And one way to stop doing something is to delete it through these 4 steps. Again, make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, and make it unsatisfying. And then we do the opposite if we want to install a good habit, right? Of make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. Again, all comes down to if you want to install a new behavior, making that habit too small to fail, and really identifying through clarity, through questions, through reflection, what you really want. Again, refer to the goal setting masterclass that I did. It's the episode right before I released this episode. And so just a few more things, right? We've really, or at least I've really hammered down the idea from BJ Fogg of making your habits too small to fail. I think it's the number one insight that we can take from habit formation. And then the idea of sort of algorithms, implementation, intentions, running things on autopilot. And we only do that if we make a standard or a rule for ourselves, which is like, if I do this, then I do that. If I walk through a door, then I meditate. If I go to the bathroom, then I do a push-up, right? And then over time, these things start to run on autopilot. Then we become the person we know we can be. And now we have the evidence that we are who we say we are. So not only do we build a new habit and we installed a new habit, or we deleted an old habit, we've also become more confident in ourselves, because confidence really means intense trust in oneself. And you build that trust through evidence. And you have the evidence now that you've created the right systems for behavior change, and you've installed and deleted the correct habits that are actually going to change your life. And now you can actually become the person you know you're capable of becoming, and actually fulfill your dreams and goals and ambitions, and become the best version of you in greatest service to the world. So let's end this episode the same way that we began, with the word discipline. The root of all good qualities is discipline. It's the driver of daily execution, right? The core principle that overcomes laziness and lethargy and excuses, right? Discipline defeats the infinite excuses that say, not today, not now, I need rest, I will do it tomorrow. No. What's the hack? How do I become stronger, smarter, faster, healthier? How do I really become better? How do I achieve true freedom? Because discipline equals freedom. There is only one way. Create the right systems and habits that work for you, that run on autopilot, that we've extensively talked about in this episode. And the only way to do that is through behavior change, discussed in this episode. But the root of it all, the foundation of it all, is discipline. Discipline equals freedom. Thank you, Jocko Willink. And thank you very much for tuning into this episode. I appreciate you very much. If you found it valuable at all, the best marketing tool we have is you sharing with a friend, sitting down, listening or watching this episode with a friend, taking notes, and doing this behavior change together as accountability buddies or partners or whatever you want to call it. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you very much for tuning in. If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, please drop a comment wherever you're watching or listening, so I know you made it to the very end. I appreciate you. Best of luck. If you need anything from me in regards to this or habit formation or behavior change, please let me know. I would love to help you. And again, thank you for your time and attention. Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.